Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and this is Ron's Bank Shot Breakdown. We're going to go over 5 college basketball games for Saturday, March 1st, 2025. Now if you like this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. Put your college basketball picks in the comments section below. And if you're looking for my best bets, the games I love the most, including my daily best bet in college basketball, my Bank Shot play, you can find those at the Premium Picks tab at pickdawgz.com. There's also a link in the description. Alrighty, here we go. Here are the games for Saturday in college hoops. First up, we have Arkansas and South Carolina in the SEC. This one, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on the SEC Network. You know, Arkansas, I've mentioned a few times, I've not been the biggest fan of this team. This was a team that was one of the more hyped up teams in the preseason. They kind of fell flat on those expectations when they were playing in these step-up games, and they were also miserable to start conference play at 0-5. Now that they've started to win some games in the SEC, those expectations and that hype is starting to pick up again. Now I think it's a good time to fade Arkansas yet again. We took Texas against the Razorbacks last time out. Kind of a bad beat in that one. It was, we always say that overtime was where dogs go to die. We were getting, 3.5, 4.5 points with Texas. The game went to overtime after Texas was up by 1 point in the final 10 seconds. And in overtime, Arkansas was able to get a pretty, beneficial call with a flagrant foul in the final 7 seconds. They made those 4 free throws and they were able to cover. But after an overtime win like that, I think that this is a clear letdown spot. And you're playing a South Carolina team that has been a lot more competitive at home this season than on the road. Yes, their record on paper in conference play is miserable at 1-14. But just go one by one in the South Carolina home games in conference play. They have been very, very close games. We saw the blowout win for South Carolina in their last home game against Texas. Before that, it was a 4-point loss to Ole Miss, a 4-point loss to A&M, overtime loss to Mississippi State, 1-point loss at the buzzer basically against the Florida Gators, one of the best teams in the country, a 3-point loss against Auburn. The only blowout loss that South Carolina has taken home this year was their very first home game in conference play against Alabama of all teams. So now, we've seen so many one-possession games, close games that the Gamecocks have put together against some of the better teams in this conference. Arkansas is no Florida, is no Ole Miss, in my opinion, is no Auburn. So I think they struggle here to cover the number. I think they struggle to win the game outright. I think South Carolina does win this game outright, plays the role of spoiler, picks up its second conference win of the year, and makes things a little bit more difficult for Arkansas as far as making the NCAA tournament. Next up, it's George Mason and Duquesne, 2 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. Now, Duquesne's kind of been a weird team this year. We saw them really struggle at the beginning of the year, 0-6, both straight up and against the spread. Then they went on a couple of win streaks. They pulled off some big-time wins, UC Irvine, St. Joe's, St. Bonaventure. Then they, again, 5-game losing streak in conference play. Now we've seen them win one, lose one recently. The most recent game was a road victory over LaSalle. And I do think that their defense is in a good enough place to keep this game close, if not pull off the outright upset. I've mentioned a few times, I'm not the biggest fan of this George Mason team. We faded him against VCU, and while George Mason was very strong in the first half, it was all VCU in the second half in a 16-point win and cover for the Rams. I had Fordham as my play of the day on Wednesday against George Mason plus the points. That was another very competitive game where Fordham was able to cover the number for us, losing by just 10 points. I'm fading George Mason again in this one. I think this is one of the weaker backcourts in this conference. They turn the ball over quite a bit. Their defense is very strong on paper, but shot quality-wise, not as strong. I got to go with Duquesne in this one. Should be a good game. I think Duquesne pulls out the outright upset. Next up, we have Cincinnati and Houston. This one, 4:30 Eastern on CBS. Now, I think these are two of the better defensive teams in the conference, both top 25 in adjusted defensive efficiency. These are two of the slower teams in the country, ranked 294th and 361st in adjusted tempo this year. Cincinnati, one of the slower defenses in the country. And I think in a slow defensive battle where the possessions are limited, this many points with the road dog is that much more valuable. I'm going to go with the Bearcats plus the points in this game. Cincinnati's defense, in my opinion, matches up well. They, overall this season, giving up a 32.4% clip to their opponents from three-point range, but they also just don't give up many three-point opportunities in general. The attempts that their opponents have been taking, some of the lowest in the conference. So Houston, which is ranked second in the country in three-point shooting, I think it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable offensively in this game. Now, Cincinnati's one key here is the defensive rebounding. Houston, one of the best offensive rebounding teams and programs in the country, not just this year, but years prior. Cincinnati's defensive rebounding has been inconsistent, but I also see that the Bearcats are also a solid offensive rebounding team themselves. If they can mix in some second chance opportunities, I do think their offense gets a big boost in this game. Also, I like the fact that Cincinnati forces turnovers, takes care of the basketball. Now, Cincinnati, one of the weaker free throw shooting teams in the country, not just the Big 12, but Houston in conference play, those free throw numbers have gotten a little bit worse since we saw them in non-conference action, so I don't think it's going to be as big of an advantage as it may have been in the beginning of the season. I think we see Houston win this game in the end, but by single digits in a defensive battle that's going to be decided in the last few possessions. Next up, it's Pittsburgh and Louisville. This one's 6 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Now, this is the second meeting of the season series between these two. The first one was on January 11th at Pittsburgh, and that was a 4-point win for Louisville. And for me, you look at that game, I mean, Louisville was outshot by over 10% from three-point range. The free throw line, it wasn't even close. I mean, Pittsburgh was 20 of 22 from the line, and Louisville was under 50% as a team. So the fact that Louisville, despite all of that, was still able to win on the road by 4 points, pretty impressive stuff. And Louisville's been very impressive this year. 15-2 conference play. This is a team in non-conference play that we took a few times. Yes, we took some losses. The game against Tennessee was an ugly one. But as a team, we didn't give up on, because we knew that this was a much better team than last year, one of the more improved teams in college basketball. And now look at them, 15-2 in conference play. For me, a dark horse in the NCAA tournament this year. But I got to go with Louisville again in this spot, especially coming off the failed cover in their last game against Virginia Tech. I think we're actually getting a little bit of a decent price, or I'd say a little bit better than we would have if the Cardinals were able to just blow out the Hokies in that last game. Now, Pittsburgh's not in great form. They've lost back-to-back games against Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. The most recent was a home loss to Georgia Tech, so not a great one there. I don't think Pittsburgh has enough here defensively to keep up for 40 minutes. Give me Louisville laying the points at home. Next up, we'll talk about the Georgia and Texas matchup at 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2, the final game we're to talk about for Saturday's card. Now, we took Texas, we mentioned, we took the bad beat with the Longhorns, unfortunately, in their last game against Arkansas as the underdog in overtime. Couldn't, that the flagrant foul in the final seconds gave the Razorbacks enough points to cover the number. But I still was really impressed with Texas and their ability to come back in that game. I think they were down by as many as 15 points. On the road, not an easy thing, especially it was at 14 points, I believe, in the second half. And Trey Johnson just really took over that ball game. He is an absolute superstar in this conference. He can take over a game at any moment. Great shooter, but also defensively a little bit underrated. Great playmaker. He scored 39 points in that game against Arkansas. I expect a big game from him here. And I think it's a bounce-back spot for Texas. I mean, Georgia's coming off the big upset win over Florida. This is a clear letdown spot for the Bulldogs. I'd much rather take them when they're playing at home, because they've been dreadful on the road this year. Just one true road victory all this season. That came back on November 15th against their rivals in Georgia Tech, so not really much of a trip there for the Bulldogs. And that was their only road win. No road wins in conference play, and we've seen some crooked final scores. 12-point loss to Ole Miss, 18-point loss to Tennessee. They only lost by 3 against Arkansas, but followed up with a 30-point loss against Florida on the road. So I got to go with Texas in this one, laying the points at home. And that's it. Those are the games for Saturday in college basketball. Hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at Pickdawgz Premium, and there is a link in the description. As always, this is Romanelli. Good luck.